Embroidery floss is made up of 6 strands. For this project, I'll just be using 1 strand of thread. If you want to know an easy way to tie a knot, you first want to thread your needle. Then place the end of the thread on top of your needle and pinch it with your thumb. Then wrap the thread around the needle. The more you wrap, the larger the knot will be, and I generally do around 4 to 6 wraps for felt projects. Then pinch everything with your thumb and pull the needle through with your other hand. And you just want to pull to the end of the thread. And then you'll have your knot, and you just want to cut off any excess thread. To start, I have my felt pieces pre-cut and ready to blanket stitch together. If you want to sew along with me, I'll have my pattern linked below. You'll want to stack your felt pieces. And then I'm going to be starting from the bottom, but you can start from any point. To start, you'll want to sew your needle through the inside of the back panel to hide your knot. Next, we want to cross over to the front panel, and what we want to do is we want to sew through it and exit back out through where we came from. And then that'll create a loop. With that loop, you want to loop your needle through twice from the right side. And this just helps to create a knot so that your first stitch will sit straight. And then when you're pulling your thread, you want to make sure that you're pulling out straight. That way your stitch sits straight and isn't crooked. And that's our first blanket stitch. We want to make sure our stitches are lining up as we go along. You can also draw a line around the inside edge with a heat erasable pen if you need an extra guide. I also have that shown in my pattern as well. For the second stitch, an easy way to find even spacing is to imagine a triangle, and at that corner is where you'd want to start. Make sure your thread is behind the needle before pulling through. It should be like this, and not like this. And then making sure to pull your thread straight. If your top horizontal stitch is crooked at all, you can use your needle to adjust it so that it sits straight, as you want it to follow the edge. And then you just want to repeat those steps. From the front panel, exit through the back, making sure the thread is behind your needle, and then pulling through and straight out. And I'll go ahead and do a couple more stitches before showing you how I pause and switch threads. And if you ever get confused about which side you should be sewing through, imagine the direction of your first stitch. it loops from the back to the front or clockwise, meaning you'll want to stitch from the front face panel, exiting to the back panel. Okay, so say you get to this point and you're reaching the end of your thread, but you still have more to sew. For your next stitch, you'll essentially be making a half stitch. And if you're sewing along, you can give this a try now, or you can wait until you actually run out of thread before trying this. But you'll want to go through the front face panel like you normally would, but you don't exit through the back panel. And now we have this wonky Y looking stitch. And then we'll want to tie off using one of these previous stitches on the inside. And now we're ready to switch threads. And I'm using a different color just for visibility. To start, similar to our very first stitch, you want to sew through from the inside of the back face panel to hide your knot. Next, we'll pick up the half stitch that we made. Grab the stitch by going underneath it with your needle, then pull your needle through. And then from here, just continue blanket stitching like normal. And if you're using the same color threads, the transition should be pretty seamless. Again, if you're sewing along, you can try this now, or you can wait until you reach the end. So you just want to make your last blanket stitch. The main difference with your last blanket stitch is that you'll just be going through the loop twice. And so you can see here, I'm already through the blanket stitch once, so I only have to go through it one more time. And now that you've made your knot, you need to hide the end of your thread. And you have two options for this. The first, you can tuck it between the felt pieces and then tie off on one of the previous stitches. And then the other way to do it is you can go through your last stitch and I usually do prefer going through my last stitch to end my blanket stitches. It does make your last stitch slightly thicker, but I personally don't mind it. And to finish, you just want to tie off on the inside. So this is if you finished your blanket stitch and then changed your mind and you need to keep sewing, or if you forgot to leave a half stitch. There's two options for restarting. I'd recommend option 1 if you're sewing something that might be played with or handled a lot and needs to be extra secure. So for option 1, you want to come up through your last stitch on the back panel. And then you want to go under the horizontal stitch, and that way you'll be following the stitch pattern. This does create a slightly thicker stitch, so it depends on what you prefer. But from here, you just continue blanket stitching like normal. For option 2, you want to come up between your last 2 stitches and make sure that the horizontal stitch is behind your needle. And if you want to make it a little bit more secure, you can anchor your stitch first by picking up a little bit of the felt. Just make sure that you don't go all the way through so that the stitch doesn't show up on the other side. And then from here, you just continue blanket stitching like normal. And if you are using the same color of thread, the transition should look pretty seamless. And here you can just see where I anchored my knot. And then I'm just going to keep doing a couple more blanket stitches. If you want to see how to do corners, you can skip ahead to the next chapter. Here's some examples I've made. The first one shows what a bad blanket stitch corner looks like, and the reason it's bad is because the stitches are making too rounded of a corner, which you can see is causing the felt corner to stick out quite a bit. And this is caused by doing only one stitch at the corner. And here's what a good blanket stitch corner looks like. You need those extra stitches to help ease around that corner to help keep its shape. And to do this, you'd want all of the corner stitches to come out of the same central point. And then here's an example of how that looks using just one strand of thread. So when you get close to the corner, you'll want to plan out where you want to start your next stitch, and that's because you want the next 2 stitches to also come out of the same point. So I try to imagine a central spot where those 3 stitches would converge. The first stitch will look like the rest of your stitches aside from planning where it starts. For the second stitch, start from the same point but angle it towards the corner. And for the third stitch, also start from the same point, but angle it perpendicular to the edge. And that's how you approach corners, and you just want to keep blanket stitching like normal from here. And then I'll just be repeating those steps, including leaving a half stitch, picking it back up, and then doing the other ear, if you're sewing along or would like a refresher. If you'd like to skip ahead, the next chapter covers how to join the end of your blanket stitch back to where you first started. Once you get to this point, you might notice we're missing that middle connecting stitch. And if you look at how the stitches are made, they're a series of L shapes. So we basically want to mimic that here. So you want to start from the back and then push your needle under the horizontal stitch between your first 2 stitches. And then pull your needle through. So next we'll want to tie our thread off. And sorry, it does get a little unfocused here. I'm basically going under the first vertical stitch on the front side and then tying my knot. Then to hide the end, tuck your knot away by weaving your needle through the middle of the felt panels, and then coming out at any point. Trim any of that excess thread, and as you shift the felt around, you won't be able to see where the thread came from, especially if you're using the same color thread as your felt. And there we have it. I hope you found this helpful and picked up a few tips and tricks. I did make a 4-part series that covers a lot of the same information, but I wanted to make a longer form video that was easier to follow. And if you have any questions, make sure to leave them down below and I'll get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. If you want more cat-related sewing projects, check out my mini felt cat tutorial. I have more videos planned, including a ladder stitch tutorial and more cat crafts, so if that's something you're interested in, make sure to subscribe.